Welcome, welcome. New year, new project. It is January 2026, and this is going to be day one of creating this new tapestry crochet piece. It's going to be a lap blanket, so I'm not going to put it on a curtain rod like I do with some others. It's going to be something that, yes, with maybe some thumbtacks, can be hung on a wall, but it's going to be functionally a blanket. I chose 6 colors in the color scheme with the green. So on my Facebook page, I had a choice of 3 charts. Got some good feedback from everybody. I had blue, red, and green. Everybody seemed to like the green. I should say everybody. The majority liked the green. I haven't tried these colors before, so I'm excited to get started. Good news with this project, you could use any color scheme that you preferred. If you did like the blue a lot, which I had a lot of people enjoy the blue as well. I was torn. I could do more than one. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how easy this particular piece is. So it is going to be a foundation of 330 stitches. It's, yes, intimidating, but it's 109 rows, so it's not like it's going to go on absolutely forever. The plan would be to do somewhere between 5 to 10 rows a night, trying to get it done in a couple weeks. Film a lot more of the project. I have a little bit more better filming equipment and microphone. Hopefully, we'll be able to share a lot more of my process, a lot more instructions, troubleshooting techniques, and what I do. So this particular video, what we're going to start with is the foundation stitch, go through my process of creating the foundation stitch, how I count it out, as well as why I don't necessarily use the foundation chain. It's not impossible to just do a chain with 330 stitches, go through that. So in front of me, I have a 3mm hook that I'm going to try. This is a resin handle. It's a little bit better than the other handles I was getting that I was just wearing through with this process. So we're going to try resin. That way I have a lime, it's a key lime color yarn here. It's actually the green that I used the least of in the project. So I'm going to choose it as the foundation chain because I'm going to have more of it than some of the other colors. And lastly, I am going to use stitch markers for this. These stitch markers are just bought off of Amazon. They're animal feet, dog feet. So I thought they were absolutely precious. So we're going to use those this project. Otherwise, I sometimes use a different color yarn, tie that onto every 50 stitches. So we're going to try that a little bit more fun. So good. Let's get started and I'll meet you back. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I have the key lime color in front of me. This is the yarn that's used technically least in the project. So since I bought 2 entire skeins of it, it's gonna be the color that I have most of. Also, the beginning of the piece is a lot of lighter colors, so it works to have a foundation chain with one of the light colors. That way, it doesn't stand out too much. If it was opposite, and part of it started very dark, it would not hurt to just do the foundation chain in the black, in the antique teal, to kind of avoid it clashing. Um, I have a 3mm hook. It's to kind of start with. It's not a bad thing to have a little bit larger hook than you are going to work in the piece, but right now I just have this one ready to go. Um, I'll start with reasoning that I use a foundation stitch instead of a foundation chain is just because the the yarn is carried, so you're going to have 6 colors carried across the entire first row. Those stitches get bulky, and so if you do have a foundation chain that is worked too tight, it might start rainbowing and kind of bowing, and it'll have like a D shape to it, and you'll have to do a lot of work to stretch it out, so the piece lays flat, kind of thing. Um, so if you do a 330 stitches foundation chain, just make sure you have a substantially larger hook, like a 8 or 9mm, and then the piece would be worked with the 3mm that I have here. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'll show you my way of doing the foundation single crochet stitch. We're just gonna slip knot the yarn onto the hook. I usually leave about a 4-inch tail. I don't necessarily measure each and every time, but that's just to be out of consistency. Okay, so to start the foundation single crochet, we're gonna chain 2. And feel free to do this loosely so it doesn't get too tight. Even with a foundation chain, it can get it can bow if the first row is way too tight. So going into the back ridge of the first chain, we're going to pull up a loop. So you'll have 2 loops on the hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through 1, yarn over and pull through 2, like that. For the second foundation, we're going to go into both loops that we just made of the stitch we just made. We're going to pull up a loop, go through 1, go through 2. Let me do a few more so you can see a close-up of what it looks like. Okay, so in short, what you'll get is kind of a single crochet height foundation stitch. You're going to have the top. So when we go to work the actual piece, we're going to start with the first stitch that we made. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are going to be the first stitches that we made. Make sure this camera gets this. And you'll kind of see this would be the right side, and that would be the back. So right side, and then back. And so what it feels like when you're working it is that you're actually going into the bottom, like that. And what this allows is it's just a lot easier to grab. You won't have the issue of it flipping or twisting as you're trying to, handle 6 other strands on that first row. Your left hand will be able to grab it a lot easier, keep it flat, and you don't necessarily get that tightness that you do. So you can kind of see these first ones do want to bow a little bit. That just means, hey, I probably need to use a bigger hook. If I do continue with this 3mm hook, I'm going to make sure these stitches are vastly a little bit looser. I want to make sure I have enough stretch there so the piece isn't going to be bowing, and things like that. And you just want to make sure that these top are just easy to slide in and out of. The idea of this project is all about momentum. So if you're struggling, you really can't get the hook in, things like that, that's going to be, problems to come. So, when you talk about, momentum, you'd want to lessen the amount of frustration in that sense. So I'm going to go ahead and get at least the first 50 stitches done. I'm going to use my stitch marker to mark that first 50 this way, and then in total there'll be a foundation chain of 330, and we'll be able to start row 1. So I'll see you back here. We'll meet back with the first 50, check in, and then keep going. All right, so I'm just progress checking. We have the first 50 foundation stitches marked. I have the stitch marker in place. And I'm continuing on. The grand total of the chain will be 330. I know that sounds very intimidating, but it being so many stitches across just means we have to do less rows. So I prefer to do less rows, just in that sense, and do kind of more each row, more details each row. That's just my personal preference. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep going. I'm going to mark every 50. We'll have a nice solid foundation to work off of when we start our first row. and I look forward to getting that started. Meet you back here. I will finish the last couple stitches on camera, and we'll get started on row 1. All right, we're on our last 6 of the foundation single crochet. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that is all 330. So nothing crazy. Have a nice foundation chain. I have just some markers in here so I kind of know where I'm at. That way. So to finish off on the foundation, I just chain 1, and then I cut the yarn about 4 inches. So I'll do that real quick. So now with that tail cut, I just pull through like that, tighten that chain, and it's nice and locked in there. So when looking at the chain itself, this side is going to be the right side. So we're going to be working the piece right to left in this direction. This side, it looks a little bit more like, I guess the middle is like kind of has that back ridge and it's more horizontal, versus this side it's a little bit more slanted. I don't know if that helps at all describe. Right side, wrong side, right side. You'll see it's a little bit easier to make sure it's not twisted. And we're back to the beginning. And so the first stitch on row 1 is going to be right here. Put the hook in, and we'll be able to begin row 1. So I'll meet you back here with the rest of the yarn, and let's get started. All right, so we are ready for row 1. I do have my written pattern here on my other screen that I'm reading off of, that I'm kind of list the instructions for. I do have the foundation stitch or foundation row ready to go. I do have the 3mm hook. And lastly, I have all 6 colors lined up, ready to go. What those look like. So I do have the black, the teal. I have this green. In the pattern it's called dark green. And then I have a neon green, which in my pattern I have written as neon. Then I have the light green, which is that key lime, which is the same color as our foundation row. And then I have a yellow here. So those are the colors. So to get started, I just have them lined up. Nothing too crazy here, so they're not tangled. I keep my yarn in a yarn bag with the grommets to kind of keep those organized and not rolling around. For the first row, I'm going to kind of mark off about 4 inches for the tail. It doesn't have to be exact. But what I do is with the yarn through both loops of the first stitch. So the only time we do both loops is this beginning to attach the yarn. And I'm going to pull all 6 colors through both loops of that first stitch. And hopefully you're not like me and miss one. So let me try and grab those greens again. There we go. This always helps not to have the first chain too tight. So now I have all 6 colors pulled through that first stitch. And I'll just kind of tighten the tails that way. Again, we'll just want to make sure they're about 4 inches long. It doesn't have to be exact. You can kind of pull that way. And now we're ready to start row 1. So row 1 begins with 18 of the yellow. So to lock it in, I'm just going to grab the yellow and only the yellow and pull through the yellow all 6 like that. It looks like I dropped the blue. Let me try that again. All right. So now that yellow is pulled through all 6 colors, I'm able to tighten them like that. It's hard to do this on camera. And we're ready to get started. So now I'm going to drape the 5 non-working colors over the hook. And so I just hold them with this finger, but they're going to be over the hook and my working color is going to be above. So I'm ready to grab it. And now here I'm going to go into that same stitch that we originally pulled in, except this time I'm only going into the back loop. Like that. And single crochet. And try not to grab strings of the other colors. There we go. Like that. So we'll have the 5 non-working draped over. Back loop only. Single crochet. Back loop. So I'm going to do 18. And so when you're just starting out with this technique, tension, it's all about tension, finding that balance. And it's like one of those, it's really a balance. So yes, you want it very tight, so that your colors aren't showing through, through the stitches by any means, like that. Sometimes that's really hard. What I can recommend is the smaller the hook or the smallest you can get the hook, with this amount of yarn, the better. Let that small hook be able to do the most of the tension work for you. Because a lot of people, including myself when I first started out, uh, your tension is like you try to compensate tension by really pulling it tightly. Oops. And I'm like, let's see if I can replicate this. Whoop, without pulling too much. And so sometimes when you pull too tightly, it actually causes more problems, which is again counterintuitive. And it actually kind of makes the stitches lean and you start getting that slanted look and they become so tight in here that you actually do start seeing the yarn in between. And that's a consequence of actually crocheting too tight. And so again, let the tension, the hook, the size of the hook kind of do a lot of the tension work for you. And what I found, especially since I am carrying the colors, I kind of pull the yarn and make a V this way. And you can see the second bar or the second loop on the hook is about twice as long as the first one. And that to me is now when I pull that loop through, it stands the tension of having so much bulk here. It kind of stands it straight up. So it's, if I'm crocheting with too much tension, for example, and those 2 bars are equal size, you can see my hook kind of wants to lean this way and not like that. So I prefer having, the hook up, this bar being twice as long as here, versus crocheting where those 2 bars are tight that way. And that's just to help counteract the amount of bulk that this adds. And also, if you kind of get to the point where it's, let's say, too loose, you might start seeing the colors that way. So again, it's all about balance. Not everybody's going to run into the same issues. So like if, you know, those are a little bit looser than the others. So if I put a lot of, tension on it, you can see the colors coming through. And if you kind of see that and it's just a couple, you can kind of tug on this end. I don't want you yanking it to the point you're like, causing this to bow, which you can kind of see it did there. And kind of hide it. You can see a little bit here. Also, if you do have one that's, you can kind of, again, this is all about momentum. You don't want to hyper focus on every little thing that you're pulling through, to be honest. So I'm going to go ahead and back those out. They're just a little bit too loose. Nobody's perfect. My pieces aren't perfect. I just have a lot of practice with them. And so I can balance my tension as I go. And so sometimes it's hard for me to troubleshoot unless I'm physically there. But I would say, yes, you're going to have a problem if it's too loose. Yes, you're going to have a problem if it's too tight. So too loose would be this bar right here is too loose. Too tight would be these two bars are like almost equal. So the middle ground is going to be, if I can actually do this, there we go. This one's going to feel small. This one's going to feel way too long almost. And make a V this way. And this is especially important when you get into those single color changes, which we'll get into here. So you don't lose those singles that way. All right, so let's see where we're at. So that is my first stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. All right. Okay. So on the 18th, we don't quite complete the single crochet. We're going to have the 2 loops on the hook. And instead of grabbing the yellow, we're going to grab the next color. So the next color I have is the light green, which is this key lime color. And I'm going to pull through that key lime to complete the color change. I'm going to drop the yellow. It's going to become the non-working color. And the key lime is going to be on top. I'm going to do 13 of the light green. Seven, 8, okay. Doesn't hurt occasionally when you have these long ones to double check. 3, 6, 9, 12, 13. Okay. So then I'm going to have 5 neon. So the neon color is this green here. I'm going to pull that through. So what you'll notice, if it helps at all, is whatever color is on the last loop of the hook, that's going to be the top bar. So if you were to change colors, let's say too early in the stitch, and this bar right here is like this green, that's going to indicate that's going to be what's the next stitch is on top. So basically I have, this is the top, and then this is the 2 bars here. And so when I pull that through, that's going to complete the lime green. And then the very next stitch is going to be the start of the neon. And we're going to do 5. And so the kind of the risk when you kind of get into this and used to it, the tightest stitch is usually going to be the first one. It's going to feel a little bit tighter. So the first time you the first stitch of the color change, be generous on the tension because that's going to be your most common. You can kind of feel it that it's actually a little extra tight just with that color change because I'm pulling it through here and all through here until this point. So it just feels a little tighter. And again, when you're doing single color changes in here, that's going to be especially important to be generous with your tension. And again, it's a counterintuitive because you think it has to be super tight. And it's like, yes, but again, let the size of the hook do most of that work for you. Just my own personal way I think about it. So I have 5 neon, and then I'm going to do 9 of the green. And let me remember. This is when I labeled stuff. Yeah, jelly bean. Okay. I thought I labeled it dark green, but I labeled it green. There we go. And as far as the way keeping stuff from getting too knotted, it's gonna get knotted. You know, a lot of people do use bobbins to kind of help. I don't. I do have the opportunity at the end of the row to cut the yarn, untangle it, start the next row. So I'm not especially worried about it, but if it does get way too tangled, it becomes a problem. So just be cognizant of, where you're dropping the yarn and kind of how you're playing around with that. So I did nine. I want to do 9 of the green. That's 6, 7, 8, and 9. And obviously, what do you mean by being cognizant? Okay, so on the previous row, I went from this neon to this dark green. I just simply dropped that green and pulled the green over it. So in this case, since I'm going back to the neon, pull that through, you can see this dark green is over the neon like that. So essentially, if I was to continue this process, if I'm switching them back and forth, you're going to get that twisted around. And yes, you can kind of untwist as you go. Another thing you can do is drop the dark green over your hook, pick up the light, and kind of squeeze it in that way. And it just kind of helps, so you'll see that the other colors are underneath this, my working, while this is over. And essentially, I'm hiding that twist in the stitch. And it's not down here in my working colors anymore. It's up here, and it's not going to cause me any tension issues. So you'll see me sometimes wrap the non-working colors over the yarn like this, and that's always going to be one. Like, you're not going to see me put all 5 over the working color in that sense. It's always going to be just the one, just to kind of hide that twist. So hopefully that makes a little sense. Obviously, once you're working these pieces, you'll get a sense of kind of how best to untangle it as you go. So I've switched back to the neon, and I'm going to do 4. And again, so this has a tendency to get real tight, so just be extra generous. We're going to do 4. Okay, and now I have a single light green. So my light green is this key lime. I'm going to hide the twist, pull that working over, and so everything goes over the hook, but sometimes the previous color goes over the working color, if that makes sense. So on this single, and of course it's also right with my stitch marker, what I want to make sure that doesn't happen, which I'll show you here, and then I'm going to do 12 yellow, is if you're not cognizant on how tight that can get, we do a couple of the yellow. Let's see how well. it can disappear real quick. Obviously, I have the stitch marker, so that doesn't help things. But you're gonna kind of get a little bit of a dip up here. So it's always good just to have an extra little bit of looseness on those single colors, and just really make sure they're even and not too tight. All that means is I come in here and I really make sure that this is just an extra, millimeter or two longer than normal. Once you have a feel of things, it gets a lot easier. Be generous and then pull that yellow through. And if you kind of get all the way done, 330 stitches, and you look and there's just a lot of bumpiness to it, it's not the end of the world. If it was the entire piece, it might be a problem. But when you're first starting out, these first rows may not look perfect. So you can kind of see even with this green stitch right here, there's a dip. It happens. Even when I do it, it's not as clean as this one all the time. You're going to get a little dip here and there, and just make sure you keep your momentum. Don't get bogged down with, perfection. I'm a perfectionist. I totally get it. I want it to look nice. Practice, momentum, row by row, and get it done that way. And, in the grand scheme of things, this stitch is not going to be seen. It's not going to stand out in the absolute final piece. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get this final row done. I'm going to show you how I fasten off the colors. Really, it's about as simple as you can get. And we'll meet back here. Thank you. Right, we are finishing up the row. We have 6 more of the neon left before we finish this off. Three more. And one last one. All right, awesome. So to finish off the row, obviously we'll have the 5 non-working and the top working. The idea is going to be that we can cut the non-working all at that 4-inch length, which I'll do now real quick. Okay. So I have those about at the same length, and because this working color is still technically on the hook, I want to cut it a little bit shorter, and that way when I pull this through the loop, it'll be the same length. So I'm going to cut that about here. So you'll see it kind of look like that. You'll have these working. We'll pull that through. And sometimes you overestimate, but they're about the same length. We can probably trim some of these longer ones. So again, it's not about perfection, it's about functionality. But pretty much because I just pulled that through and these are here, it's going to stay. Some people worry like, hey, how does it not unravel? How did these not pull through? Well, the entire piece has like so many color changes, especially when you get into some of the rows that have like tiny amounts. And what that essentially does with all these color changes here is it creates a giant knot. So it stays together by itself in the weight, and it's not going to pull through. So just to view what we did on the first row, I'm going to pull up the picture of what we're doing, and you can see here where we started was this top right corner in this yellow, and we ran all the way down vertically to here, and that is the row that we completed. So you can see the yellow here, and as we go through, you'll kind of see some a little lighter colors And as we get to kind of this midpoint, you'll start seeing that blue. And then when you kind of come through here, you're going to start seeing the dark teal and the black. And then it's going to end in this light color. And that is what it shows. So that's our row 1. We're going to go ahead and keep going and provide updates as I go along. Please let me know your feedback if you have any questions or if we have any other troubleshooting things you want me to go over and how to do this. Absolutely let me know. And I'll see you here shortly. Thank you.